Hello, America. Since founding, there are proofs because through administrations, intelligence does things and did things to have people speak things on phones that are real but fake. True is used for lies after they already had other recorded on phones, and they're where they have uses of what people say used to cover up with how they already had collusion with all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the difference of their guilt or the three branches of government's names with conjunctions to themselves, or the intelligence tied to them, which are A through Z. They are criminally foreign influence, hyper criminally foreign influence. They don't have possession of their name /S. For example, humanity. We have only been allowed to hear humanity voicing through and as systems abridged from what nature communicates about humanity, where we are a different species body of individual bodies, an individual species body of individual bodies, per that which is generating totally different species bodies, also of individual bodies. So we could discern what is generating all group differences. It is functional. That and how nature's nature has is distinct from nature. For example, our nature is nature's nature, but we could ignore its system because its complete identity relationship to all parts of itself at once is distinct from its relationship and relativity /hyper-relativity to the parts of itself where a special difference is important too. A special difference serves function /S, where nature makes demonstrations to us of what is true always, not denying sequence, not denying self-valid roles, pretending other. Use /S of all natures of collusion /S, not just the acts, in other words, because that's used to screen. Like, for example, with black pupils, whites of eyes. If someone denies someone the ability to use this as evidence alone, in other words, against what has formerly been accepted regarding black and white, where they make syntax the only people we have allowed to be heard. They had obligations by nature itself and by our founders to communicate about how a breaching method before our founders were born. Again, the only name we know, the only founder we know the name of specifically was a founder, was James Madison. And they also had declassified for ourselves why and how they did not have free speech at the time. Even when James Madison was then a president also, not just a founder. And his plan, that's how we were directed to tell it. And his plan involved the counter-extortion of everyone else. People won't even allow people to be honest about the extortion of George Washington, or it would have brought this up because it was already declassified. The names of the people of the sciences have self-valid roles with criminally foreign influence /hyper-criminally foreign influence, if you will, and tactically delusions wrought, tellings of American history and of other countries' histories, specifically because this breaching method knew that nature would control and increasingly demonstrate to everyone. For example, one of the things all those laws were involved as they were sickly distinctly against Native Americans, sickly distinctly against the tribes of Native Americans, sickly distinctly helping them or hurting them, and the same exact way with every human difference, to keep everyone blaming other things, others, or ourselves for nature's demonstrations of itself. Nature shows us that one of the things that are true always, all those sickly, distinctly multi-front against humanity roles and impositions upon human differences was about a human fact treatment nature breaching method. All the positive treatments and negative treatments were collusion /S, as roles hyper additionally too, blaming and having blamed other things, others, ourselves, for nature's demonstrations of that, like how nature demonstrates to us. A human fact treatment nature breaching method is one of the things that was entrenched, that was true always, what those laws were value as. And the breaching method knew and keeps all truths about that used for lies. And that defended and that makes a raise of sides with issues as a collusion slash yes too, just to keep locations, areas, and states sensing for a breaching method. That's what self-value rules as the array of opinions, seeking and changing and faking what others say when they speak about predicate acts. Their whole predicate acts with facts methods, sustained upon all locations slash s, and sickly distinctly. And the reason we haven't addressed how sickly non-distinctly, even though it's recorded, that's recorded too. So Judge Napolitano has intelligence sources and people that use the retired interbranch names and intelligence tied to them. The difference of them as interbranch or as intelligence. That also there were collusions with uses of that, where there are subject treatments of this. Three branches of government, in standing or the retired. They have collusions with the standing branches of government where they switch names and forge names and refuse to identify themselves legitimately. And they have been collusion slash S with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, and interbranch families and intelligence tied to them, and they never had their possession of their identities either. They're criminally foreign influence slash hyper-criminally foreign influence. Worse than criminally incompetent, speaking about the law relative to where and how. They have principles treatments with the names of the people of the sciences. In the sciences, distinctly but non-distinctly multi-front breached. The principles treatments in the books and the names and the natures regarding all that as criminal insidious nature. Styles of logic, natures of logic that can't afford to have communicated with nature does, with how and why. We have black pupils, whites of eyes, revelations, relativity slash hyper-relativity. Again, we don't need to list all that. It's all listed. So I recorded before the wars between and the killings between Palestine and Israel and Iran. I didn't put Iran into it, but I understand that and how the beginning of the Old Testament and the beginning of the Quran, certain type of victim slash hyper victim, as the people countering the religions, as the people defending them, and or as the people with the exceptions like atheists. They are an array that has collusion slash that's where there are differences brackets, where they already have and have had self-valued rules with subject treatments at every age and nature of campus. The breaching method knew were demonstrated by nature about, and our founders communicated for this about they left declassified for themselves to communicate about this, and it's still that way. But where and how we have abridgments of what nature communicates and rolls with it formally and private. We have the styles, needs, and nature to blame, forcing self-valuing other things, others ourselves having been blamed for what really caused the negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures in the past, and as the breaching method. So rather than clearer than day, the answer proper when people say, "Oh, the founders had slaves." Our founders had to put fake identities about themselves. Everyone had to, even any body of people, even as a majority, a body of people, even any country unified with voice. Even any grouping of countries, as long as you're still locations, areas, and states, fact, shape, nature, quality, aspects, and nature's entertained as is. There's possession over the nature of debate slash S itself. There are collusions slash S itself. Already, self-valued rules haven't been left out. The state of Connecticut corrections offices and judicial offices have people named DeMorrow and a whole bunch of others involved with intelligence families on my street and on streets parallel per themselves. And it's nothing personal against those people. In other words, all exception nature that appear to be in demonstrations of other. It comes from demonstrations of sequence shifts roles interstates with interbranch and intelligence families, and the interbranch refusing to identify themselves legitimately. Wethersfield police have some Mendez police that faked conversations with me and with their educators in the intelligence community, involved with them since I was a kid. And I never even saw them on a campus. They tried to make a quick exception. One time, by having them walk by me, the older Mendez brother, who attached me a fake transcript with him, fake quotation, speaking to him at the Wethersfield Police Department, as their collusion/S with Saudi attackers, with intelligence families that used to live in my area, who are increasingly from where they are now too, have been planting evidences with many tied to them, like a Robert Rodriguez, also involved with people on all sides of a religious spot, and conjunctive to that, involved with a Robert Rodriguez. He brought up the principal child abusers campus and people with the name Scalora next to it. They're also involved with all kinds of psychiatry with intelligence families next to Hartford Hospital, who are intercities with intelligence next to the campuses and or at the campuses. In the difference of the guilt too, and people just going by take fake exception. A subbipagerio. Never saw them inside of a campus. They try to make a fake exception on the side of a campus. There are proofs that they took a picture there to make it look like I knew him, like a fake exception of me knowing him. And because they also have New Britain Superior Court has multiple child abusers, leaders, and kids years apart, and people involved with all kinds of natures of organized crimes with a subbipagerio, and people tied to him that know my name. I don't even know their name. It has something to do with these are people from Wethersfield. I don't know where they are in Wethersfield, but it's intercities, and their roles with the sides of Central Connecticut State University, with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and a bunch of people from New Britain Superior Court have roles with sequence shifts and organized crime acts and methods as federal evidence is crime used remotely investigators and their campuses and their family members, other natures of conjunctions to them. Forgiveness is because this is all that is allowed to be manifest because of what is recorded, the organized crime methods /S uses of the campuses, uses of people's names, uses of interbranch forging and switching names, refusing to get on paper, intercities. They're keeping self-valued, criminally poor and influenced careers, standing and retired. Forgiveness is so we could admit this because it's that country's A through Z too. Then one side starts speaking about the corruption, every fake from every other side, individually grouped it together, starts going, oh, look, they're corrupt. In other words, they're forcing the quality of fact-checking nature. A, therefore, B, bullying logic, criminal and C, says nature of it. Criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence, and pretending other as identities of patriot natures at countries A through Z. Only capable of the styles of that and nature of the defense of that with their logic or nature uses exactly the way the breaching method needs to measure and maintain self-value rules of criminally foreign influence, fact-checking nature, quality aspects and natures, and use /S of our founders' communications replaced and of natures simultaneously. And everyone's sensing, they're using their knowledge of good and evil, even if they have something recorded. Like a John DeMorrow, he's recorded. He called me up. I don't know who was on the background. They recorded themselves trying to cover up things that way. Chris Walters is also involved with people, men and women with the name Bobby, on the sides of Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, with a bunch of people in the Britain Superior Court, and with the intelligence families next to Hartford Hospital, who also have roles with drugs and medicines crimes and federal evidence crimes with foreign and domestic intelligence with the campuses intercities. They're putting whole fake transcripts and medical databases. Hartford Hospital has a bunch of people with the name Leahy tied to predicate acts on my street with them fake conversations with me. Also with judges and prosecutors, personally and professionally involved with them, fake transcripts and their family members, and their roles with wire crime acts and predicate acts methods with the same house/S, increasingly involved with police departments, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, putting fake transcripts and ties to kids because no one's looking in their databases. They're doing this with the campuses, black pupils. It's not legitimately how such fake integrity pretended they can't see, all and got away with it all this time, where we could discern clearer than day. At all locations/S, the suburbs were designed before America's founders were born to force, trick, hurt, and persuade that people the same onto value nature systems tactical ulterior from its own. That's how it got the Native Americans to fight with Native Americans. And the difference of that, while they're helping them too, they'll help them or A through Z, just to keep other things, others or selves, blamed for what nature demonstrates as the breaching method. That which is true always. That nature is demonstrating a human fact human nature breaching method is one of the things that is true always. That all those laws were about before America's founders were born. And we were directed to understand that the only founder we know the name of specifically is James Madison. And we were directed to understand how his plan is what was used to extort. To counter extort, rather, George Washington. The breaching method was a part of his extortion, torture of him, in fact, human nature, slavery of him and of everyone else. No one had free speech. Think about it. If someone wants to debate that, the only reason they could get away with that is relative to the relativity / hyper-relativity of these criminally foreign influence, fact human nature, and premises treatment with each age and nature of fact human nature. Increasingly, people, Rick Ciampaglione, and people from my grammar school that I never saw around the grammar school, they tried to make a couple quick exceptions, and they had a girl. They put me fake ties to him, fake nature ties to him. It was nothing personal. And even though one time he hit me right when I came around the corner, it wasn't him who planned that, and I didn't even know who he was then. That was when I was in first grade. Two kids, I don't even know who told me that. Two kids told me to go right there. So right when I went around the corner, I got punched in the ear. And I never saw the kid in my words. And he has rules with the house /S with people increasingly with falsified police reports and acting tied to that, news at the same time. WFSB attached me. They have all kinds of organized crime acts and methods. For example, they attach people to fake conversations with themselves and with others, and they attach others to changed conversations with themselves. And they lie about the outcomes of legal cases, and investigators say, oh, well, that's what I thought, because the investigators and their campuses and their family members and locations/S are used criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, wrought, and them self-value rules are sentencing for the breaching method. Any body with syntax addressing any subject properly. Please have them get on paper. Judge Napolitano. These are people there are also people with the name Domain and Mendez next to Fox Connecticut News involved with differences racket, intercultural and interreligious spots with that rules with sexual medical offenders that are personally and professionally with interbranch, pretending passions and emotions, all kinds of drugs and medicines, crimes with the kids, and methods of all kinds of scams. There are more, in other words, they have Twitter involved with this. Now they have X involved, and they're going to have Elon Musk do it. He doesn't have the sophistication to deal with, nor the honesty to deal with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, recorded involved with the Facebook page of the Britain Spirit Court, with Harvard Hospital's campus, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, with judges and prosecutors, putting fake things and sequence shifts in databases, little fake punks. Since founding, tactical delusions wrought too. These are people with their family members too, with them, with the media, cover-ups, pretending other. That we have to address how nature and positive treatments and negative treatments, they're being used to get over on correlation nature. So get them on paper, one name and sequence. Harvard Hospital has a bunch of sexual medical offenders of kids, roles into with their where they live too. A Dr. Laura Saunders is also involved with the mixed natures of organized crimes with the FBI, with WFSB, and foreign and domestic military, and Saudis for them with the World Trade Center attack, and their roles with these names tied to the Mendez brothers, and their educators and families. In other words, since I was a kid. And there's a David Santangelo, I believe is his name. I never saw him inside of a campus in my life. He is increasingly involved with my own family and people all along the Berlin Turnpike with identity theft, fraud, slander, sequence shifts, predicate acts with facts in databases, collusions they don't even know about, understand, but acting tied to that. So in other words, people on a mass scale use and have used the right to lie, but they don't have the right to lie. And these are also people with the state corrections offices and the state judicial branch offices of Connecticut involved with the World Trade Center attack, and with inter and intra-cultural, and inter and intra-cities, and inter and intra-campuses. And this is rules of differences rackets cover up. So it's the difference of guilt there, or a names next to them, or just temporary next to them. WTNH with the FBI has names that are involved, all from Old Weathersfield founding locations, Main Street and Old Weathersfield Field, and conjunctions to it, all along Route 175, through Weathersfield, through Newington, and into New Britain, all sides of which you go straight to Central Connecticut State University, and all sides of it are increasingly names involved with the World Trade Center attack through other natures of organized crime acts and methods, federal evidences, crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders. So I only know a sub Bugerio is involved with people with the intelligence next to the state capitol that are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, wrought, also involved with victims advocates with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and sexual and medical offenders of kids. And as the same families involved with elderly homes, there are proofs they're involved with the veteran homes. Because look how they look like, those buildings behind the people in the rap videos. And little suburban kids know that the suburbs were designed tactically to nature before America's founders were born. So therefore, they are not capable of being defended as proper human identity relationship to itself, nature, and to the ground. Hyper additionally, see native dreams. I believe it is Navajo traditional teaching, the YouTube channel, which said we must read each other's dreams. Part of the reason this is so important, it's such a good way of speaking about it, is because there is a hyperforeign that needs everyone to blame other things, others, ourselves, because nature has been showing us. For example, again, that's one of the things true always. That all those laws were value as. And you don't leave out how and why there's a witch trials place next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. And don't leave out how then and now, as evidence, other things, others ourselves, who are forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to be blamed for why and how the North and the South had roles with slavery. In other words, we're supposed to blame the breaching method for that too. We're supposed to blame how our founders and why our founders did not have free speech. To explain that, we have to explain the breaching method. Nature is showing us a bunch of ways. A human fact-achieving nature breaching method has self-valued rules with itself, with natures of logic, styles of logic, exceptions. In other words, you guys need to follow mandated laws. And the Britain Superior Court has people with Facebook and with Twitter involved with the FBI and whiting forensics with digital crimes, with Wethersfield campus's Facebook page, and one's intercities with private campuses too, where there's like a whole bunch of Trinity College, reported, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed kids and adults have roles with the Joshua Stryker, with identity theft, fraud, slanders against me, and federal evidences crimes, predicate acts with the FBI, and with co-defendants, a former director of the FBI, various natures of federal criminals, including the ones not associated with them. And they're also recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirming. They have roles with hate groups themed that are pretending they're legitimately intelligence, pretending they're black themed, or even their real cultures, like these Mendez police involved with identity fake conversation be at the Wethersfield police station. That wasn't at all. Never had a word of conversation with the older Mendez police brother. They have all kinds of roles on Facebook and intermedia with sexual medical offenders of kids years apart, first forced. And I caught them forcing that. And they pretended they have collusion / a whole bunch of people in the Britain Superior Court have roles of a whole bunch of Wethersfield police and their family members. Also with other police departments of Connecticut with the same house / as personally and professionally involved with them with ongoing wire crime acts and methods and confessions. Also pretended other. This breaching method used confessions before religious messages were born. Confessing without anyone even realize them were confessing. Is a breaching method hurt people to get the people operating the names A through Z of the countries to blame other things, others, ourselves for things that it caused, specifically to get them to do that and then to defend that and to get the people to counter that and defend that syntactically, therefore physically, and then increasingly incapable of defending that and of affording to be used properly the words by the names of the sciences, by the names of by the identity of the sciences shared, while not for where and how it is functional. How one thing is not any other thing, but is all things anyway. Hear many pray. Has three identities of relationship to itself. That which will part of itself, which will not mix with temporary / lasting space nature at all, and part of itself that will mix, where how we are quality of diffusion to an extent, it will mix, and that extent comes with a special difference, appreciated its way here as Earth's difference as our own, or that difference is forced from here, as forced space nature transfer, as lethal bodies. So humanity's value, we're only one species body. That's why it took so long for all our value to be for the whole Earth, to get the nature this way. Many pray. So Judge Napolitano has people that have been spying on me with the Wethersfield police and within the Britain Superior Court to cover up their roles with the FBI and the other countries and Saudi Arabia people involved with WFSB in Rocky Hill, and with Fox Connecticut News people like involved with the Wethersfield police, like this Mendez police, these Mendez brothers that are with the Wethersfield police intercedes with the hallway of the Britain Superior Court. They forced societies to collusions with them, putting me in a fake conversation with this Mendez brother. And they're increasingly roles with the DeMoro family, who has roles with a girlfriend involved with them, with a home break-in, and with other home break-ins, with other people she was involved with, and her educators involved in, and increasingly with former director of the FBI and his co-defendants and their family members, like a Don LeConche, is increasingly involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders against me, with people I never even had classes with. In intercities, there are proofs interstates too and internationally. So please get them on paper, one name and sequence. Joe DeMoro said he's got people involved with Italy, involved too with all along Route 3 and conjunctions to it and to that, like Valley Crest Street and Morgan Circle, involved with my 5th grade teacher, increasingly involved with people in my 4th grade class, for example, and 6th grade class with body dumping spots, totally different body dumping spots, increasingly getting brought up when they get brought up, involved with people that weren't even in classes with me, involved with identity theft, fraud, standards. In other words, people that don't even know each other, they're making things that appear to be debatable. They're lying about what they think about motivations, and they're tactically delusions wrought. The people that are trying to moderate and solve issues. In other words, they're doing it the way the breaching method needs. Then they can't have that discerned properly in the future. And while this is active, they're valuing this having been. They're reliant upon having been. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, wrought principles, treatments with the sciences, with reason, logic, the nature of the big back to people's beer. All right, thank you. Please, Judge Napolitano, get the Wethersfield Police and the Britain Superior Court on paper. Harvard courts too. They have a judge. They have an officer Hunter involved with them, with a Dean Judd of Central Connecticut State University, his family members and other people tied to them. Involved also with the Dean Alford at Trinity College with this Joshua Stryker. I never had a word of conversation with Joshua Stryker in my life. He's been planting sequence shifts since I was a kid. Fake ties, fake natures of ties to me with the Oliveri family and other people with the state judicial branch offices. Involved with predicate acts in between campuses, all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders, and roles the difference of their guilt, their family's guilt, or their educators. And it's also that way manifest because there are other people involved from off campuses sustaining collusion / S that no one wanted. That's why you need to get them on paper. They want to have play games. Get them on paper into branch. Wethersfield Police, the Harper courts, they have an officer Hunter there. Then they're pretending there might not be his name. These are also people with the FBI director Robert Luskin involved with courts and their family members and a foreign and domestic military at West Harper locations affected confessions to me and demonstrations to me regarding the Dean Judd. I never saw Dean Judd in my life in person. And I never had a word of conversation with who was reportedly his son. And it's a federal crime, worse than that, to pretend that. These are people involved before the World Trade Center attack with relative predicate acts, criminally foreign influence, fact, cheap nature, quality, federal evidences, crimes, identity thefts, fraud, slanders, fake motivations for it, roles, and collusion / S, increasingly with people intercities involved with the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices in Wethersfield. And the differences of the guilt there with that or conjunctions to it. Forgiveness is to not leave out the hyper-foreign breaching method that caused and keeps negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures that nature demonstrates and demonstrations of itself blamed on other things, others, or selves. It keeps styles of that. Nature's doing that, valuing that having been done. Otherwise, sensing for the breaching method that, in other words, but that's precedent. That's not precedent. We must be led by the hyper invisible, but still discernible. English and other ancient languages were revealed to be taught this way. There's a difference between nature's nature and nature. And for example, nature shows us this because it has a distinct identity of relationship to itself that is not juxtaposed with ourselves and as ourselves, but also as a non-distinct. It has simultaneous / hyper-simultaneous, with our quality of diffusion that English was revealed with other languages still to teach before the sciences became criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, and incapable of affording to be appreciated properly. What the ancients understood, unabridged, how the ancients were demonstrated to by nature itself, and by nature's nature itself too. About the difference of that shows us the difference between its individual body. It shows us where and how we could discern that identity of value progression. For example, again, that which is not our species' individual body of individual bodies, is not the other species' individual bodies of species bodies of individual bodies, but is the one generating that all things. So we can discern vaccines itself. hyper-foreign way. Many pray. Pantheism is not about multi. Pantheism is about grouping or multi tactical relative to this, relative to that one identity of value / value progression. We're not supposed to agree upon the name to call it, because that's the invisible but still discernible. This is a method of using the hyper-invisible but still discernible. We don't leave out the smallest finite detail, let alone finite grouped ones and simultaneous ones at the same time. Black pupils, we were directed to discern how a breaching method reassign Black pupils' white device, communication, natures. We are still no free speech offensively. Westfield police have roles intercities with the networks, the difference of their guilt, the intelligence next to them, or their sources too, because they have multiple natures of organized crimes with the same fake conversations. And as collusion /S with many countries. Vaccines. Get them on paper so we don't have to I have to beg and keep explaining all this stuff. Because if you don't explain, that's why they force you to delete for themselves. Also, how the breaching method uses confessions and then of other people, then non-verbally has people to demonstrate. Like a Phil Collusion was involved on my street with a Bob Chase, further with some sexual medical offenders of kids, and with violence and intercultural, and they have roles with foreign and domestic countries, involved with all kinds of scams with psychiatry and names next to the hospitals, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with them. They have cousins involved with the state judicial branch office, corrections offices. They also have collusions with home break-ins, car break-ins, years apart. These are people pretending to be against crimes, as is recorded, because they had to cover up their roles with predicate acts methods, wire crime acts methods, roles with criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, or uses of all natures of investigators already. The prisons, the state corrections offices, and the judicial branch offices, and the people who work at the prisons, they need to hide life progressions and have time collusions, all kinds of natures of predicate acts methods. And identity theft, fraud, slanders instances with people next to body dumping spots, years apart, totally different body dumping spots, totally different reported killers. No, get them on paper, one name and sequence. Yeah. Same ones involved with more World Trade Center predicate acts, interstates. Same ones involved with the other countries involved, and with the counters to cover this up. You guys aren't supposed to jump in our conversations dishonestly. You guys are obligated by mandated law to get them on paper, one name and sequence. See the people tied in places tied to the leasing agents, tied to intercities, to a Kovenskis and a Violet, and people with the spots in New Britain and West Hartford line and town lines intercities. Watch. Black people.